Rick, of course, you're welcome to complete your thoughts. I would like also to gain your assessment of the role of the United Kingdom in the world today. Charles seems to be all in with the war in Ukraine against Russia and equally supportive of the Israeli genocide of Palestinians. These seem to me horrific blunders, but he, as king, has the resources, vast resources at his disposal, which it appears to me are being used for wrong reasons, that the UK is on the wrong side of history. Your thoughts?
Oh, I think you're right. I try to avoid it. A very simple way. Ukraine is UK reign, right? And it's like out of this, I think the fake British royal family will collapse, and I think that Charles is just the perfect person to have the British royal family collapse because he's not a blood royal. He comes from a long line of illegitimates. He's got an illegitimate. He's got an illegitimate son. He's got an illegitimate daughter conceived in 1968 with a maid in Balmoral Castle. He's got another illegitimate child. So he's got three illegitimate children. He's not the father of Prince William, and he's not the father of Prince Harry. So he's got five illegitimate children, and he's got no legitimacy in his crown. He's got no legitimacy in his objects. The crown, orb, scepter, and coronation stone are all fake. Coronation stone he uses is a sewage manhole cover. I've got the real coronation stone. He refused to use it because it would invoke the wrath of God because he's from a long line of illegitimates. And then he was involved in the Northern Bank robbery, which was the biggest.
Really?
Yeah, which was the biggest robbery in UK history. So what happened was in 2004, British Army 77th Brigade wanted to be formed, and that was aimed at counterintelligence in the social media attacking truthers, right? And some of those people trained in the British Army 77th Brigade actually changed their surname to Windsor in that year, 2004, to confirm their allegiance to the program of attacking truthers. And that was funded, the British Army 77th Brigade counterintelligence operation against people telling the truth in the social media. That was actually funded by the Northern Bank robbery, which stole £26.5 million on the 20th of December 2004. And the people involved in that robbery was Camilla Parker Bowles' ex-husband, Brigadier Andrew Henry Parker Bowles, his business partner, Ted Cunningham, who was convicted for it, Ted Cunningham's son, and Mark Shand, who was Camilla Parker Bowles' brother.
Wow. And they basically got away with it, and the goods, the vast sum was never recovered?
Well, what they did is just before the robbery, Mark Shand started up a charity called Elephant Family, and that was designed to launder money, right? It was designed to launder the Northern Bank robbery money. So what they would do is they would give the money, transfer it to Osama bin Laden's two brothers, right? And Osama bin Laden's two brothers would donate it to the Elephant Family so it could be laundered. And the two patrons, the two royal patrons of Elephant Family who direct where the money is spent are Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles.
Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles
were in charge of the money. Once it was laundered through Elephant Family, it was at the behest of Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles to spend it how they liked. And they spent it on the British Army 77th Brigade counterintelligence against people telling the truth in social media. right?
Wow.
Now, I've published this, and I've listed my sources, and one of my sources is Wikipedia. It's
Which is
actually,
a Zionist stop, Gregory, of course. I mean, I've tried to correct many false claims they make about me or scholars for 9/11 Truth, which I founded and been rebuffed. They want to use it to discredit, contemporary events and sources that contradict their official policy, though on a vast variety of subjects, they're quite good and reliable. But that's like the classic formulation for disinformation: 80% true and accurate with a 20% false and misleading payload.
yeah, well, what I did is I read the story of the bank robbery and got all the sources and went through it. And I could see how they're trying to cover the tracks and lie and misdirect. And I got rid of the misdirections. And then I looked at the operation as though it was an operation. And I let the quotations tell the story of what actually happened. And this is what happened. So they tried to stitch up one guy. First, they killed his brother 4 days before the robbery. He was like a baker or something. And problem with killing him 4 days before the robbery is they couldn't pin it on him because he didn't have the money because the robbery hadn't happened. So then about 2 weeks after the robbery, they pinned his brother and sent him to prison for 5 years on the basis of supposedly doing the Northern Bank robbery. But they produced absolutely no evidence whatsoever that he'd done the robbery. So after 5 years, he got out, and then they had to pin it on someone. So they pinned it on Camilla Parker Bowles' ex-husband's business partner, Ted Cunningham. He did 5 years of 10 years, and then he appealed after 5 years. And then Prince Charles came along and he rewrote the laws of Ireland, right? So that the head of the judiciary in Ireland could not, or so that the head of the police in Ireland could not charge someone for a bank robbery. It was blatant. It was absolutely blatant. So Ted Cunningham got off after 5 years instead of 10 years, and he had to pay back £3 million, £3.03 million of the robbery money. So of the £26.5 million stolen, £3 million was paid back. But by the time he got out of prison, it was 2014, and by the time it was all settled, it was about 2018, and people have lost interest in it and also lost their money. So the person behind the robbery was Camilla and Charles. Now, Camilla timed it really well. So the robbery was on the 19th and 20th of December 2004, and she married Charles 111 days later, which was incredibly embarrassing for Charles, and he had to cover up the robbery. So Camilla gets married to Charles, and she says, oh, by the way, myself, my ex-husband, and my brother robbed the Northern Bank and his business partner, and you're going to cover it up for us. And Charles is so weak, he's so weak-willed, he goes, okay.
Just outrageous. It's like he's parallel to the imposter we have here in Washington, D.C., who calls himself Joe Biden, it's clearly not the guy from Delaware. I've dug up old videos of the real Joe talking with constituents. He's very animated, expressive, intelligent, articulate. Not that I would agree with what he's saying, but his manner is very much like my own. And then I look at this cadaver who appears to be all loaded with electrodes. Greg, I don't know if you saw recently, they showed footage of him walking out to the Air Force One chopper, and it was like a robot. And that's because they've got him all wired up, and he was acting in accordance with a program, and his behavior was utterly robotic. It could have been R2D2 or, it was just ridiculous what's going on here. And everything he says is controlled behind the scene. Many of us believe that in effect the commander-in-chief of the United States military is now Benjamin Netanyahu. And given the extent to which the Zionists control our Congress, frankly, that puts matters into far more clear perspective than if you assume it's this guy they call Biden who lost massively in 2020, but they rigged the election. We're worried they're going to do it again. Thoughts on any of the above?
Yeah. Because North America was given to Walter Raleigh and it was passed down to me, that I'm the owner of North America. So any elections that you have for the United States of America is completely a non-issue. So they're trying to muddy the waters unbelievably, right? You don't even have a United States of America. It doesn't exist. You've got North America and you've got a Jesuit overlay, which is termed legal, but it's not lawful. It's the theft of an entire nation. So this is happening simultaneously in the United States of America, or more accurately, North America, and it's happening in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, or more accurately, the Kingdom of England and the Kingdom of Scotland, right? So you can't actually make a claim unless you've got the real words for the real thing. And what you've got is this massive Jesuit illusion happening where they talk ambiguously, they talk with patent ambiguity, they talk about A and B and D and E, and then at the end of their talk, they claim they made the main point on C, but they've never actually addressed C, right? So you're having an election. Who's going to win the election of the United States of America? Or who's going to win the election of the USA? But what about the election for North America? It hasn't happened in hundreds of years, right? You had 9 presidents of North America before the Jesuit takeover in 1767 or something, you know? So you've got to get your names right. You've got to know who you are. You're North Americans. You live in North America. You live on the North America land. You have a North America coastline, and you are south of Canada, and you are north of Mexico.
Fascinating stuff, Gregory. I'd like your opinion about some key figures on the world stage today. First, Vladimir Putin.
Yeah. Well, he's acknowledged me, which is kind of good. He's got a difficult job because the press in the West, as you know, the press in the West is a complete disaster. It's just a sack full of lies, and they'll just lie against anyone. So you don't actually really know what Putin's done. You don't actually really know whether the war in the Ukraine is real or whether it's just battles over biolabs and the actual so-called bombings, etc., are just staged, you know. You actually don't know, and you don't know whether the war in Ukraine is actually about relocating the so-called Jews from so-called Israel to southern Ukraine, you know.
How about
what's real? You know, what's real? And there's different Putins, you know. You see him sometime and he's 6'3", and at other times he's 5'6", and he's younger, he's older, he's plumper, he's not. You just don't know, you know, who is it that's being presented, and the Western media is going, it's Putin, you know, and they show someone, so, you know, it could actually be an actor in America a lot of the time.
How about Donald J. Trump?
Well, you know, he's very obviously used body doubles as well. All of them using body doubles. Like Queen Elizabeth, you know, there's 4 of those. Prince Charles, there's 7 of those. Putin, there was 3 of those back in 2007, so there's at least 4 or 5 now. Trump, there's probably about 7 Trumps. Biden, there's like multiple Bidens. And the thing about his mask that he obviously wears is that his mask and hairpiece never ages. Right?
Never ages.
It never ages. And you got Trump with white skin, you got Trump with tan skin, you got Trump with crimson skin, you got Trump with very golden ginger hair, you got Trump with fairer coloured hair, and there's about 7 different Trumps as well. This is what's presented in the media, so you actually don't know what they're saying or what they're doing or what the program is, right? So you might actually have the real Trump sitting in the background with the real Putin and deciding some real things, right? And what they're doing with the media is they're showing you that it is such an obvious charade that it is all the Jesuit overlay of legal, but it's not lawful and it's not real, right?
So go ahead, just go ahead. Benjamin Netanyahu, Greg.
Well, he's in for the second time, isn't he?
Oh, I think he's served as PM multiple times, but he seemed to be bringing down Israel to save his own judicial from corruption. He proposed revising the Israeli constitution to weaken the judiciary. Many believe the whole war on Gaza is driven by his effort to save himself from a fate that he's going to encounter nevertheless. I have long believed the war in Ukraine was to create a new Israel, because most of the occupants of present-day Israel are actually descendants not of the tribe of Judah, but from Khazarias. They'd like to return to the homeland. The defeat by Russia, I think, has in part motivated the ethnic cleansing to remove or kill every Palestinian from the lands of Palestine. They want to annex Gaza. They want to seize the oil and gas rights. They want to build the Ben Gurion Canal. All of this is going to be at the expense of the Palestinians, whereas I've said before, the final solution from the Israeli point of view is to load all the Palestinians aboard a ship, float it out to sea, and sink it.
Yeah, that's what sociopaths and psychopaths do. So my challenge to the so-called Jews of so-called Israel is, do any of the Jews in Israel, can they trace their genealogy back to Israel? I don't think they can, right? And there's people in movies and on TV programs, etc., and they're saying, the Jews aren't the Jews. They're also saying that Catholics aren't Christians and Muslims aren't Muslims, right? So we've got this complete non-reality that we've been living with since, let's say, 1900. And it doesn't exist, right? It's a non-reality. So if you look at the Jews today, right, and you look at their language, the Khazarians had a choice to become Catholics or Muslim because they're on the trading route, and they're sort of between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea and that Georgia Strait, and they decided to become Jews. This is in about 879 AD. And then they funded the Lutheran Bible 1519 to 1522 and had themselves written into the Bible as the Jews. And they didn't have the language. They didn't speak Hebrew. And Hebrew hadn't been spoken since 200 AD, hadn't been spoken or written. So these Khazarians got 400 people together, and they developed this language called Hebrew between 1880 and 1920, and then they applied to the forerunner to United Nations, which is called League of Nations. Yeah. So in 1921, these 400 people were tested to see if they could speak this language, and they passed. So this language was called New Hebrew or Modern Hebrew, and it became an official language in 1921, and it hadn't been spoken or written since 200 AD. Right? So all this incredibly difficult to pronounce stuff like all those sounds, it's all invented, right? So the Hebrew language is invented, and the so-called Jews that have occupied Israel has been invented on the back of a napkin. Like the Balfour Agreement was a 2-paragraph letter, not even on a letterhead. It was just something typed up, you know. It said, Great Britain, which is a not a legal entity, will assist the so-called Jews back into Palestine as a homeland for Jews, to be called Israel. It was called Palestinian until 1905, and then the maps changed it in 1905 to Israel. And then the Jews moved in, the so-called Jews who aren't Jews, moved in 1948. And, it just created mayhem and used it as a platform to take over North America. And take over the Jesuit and work with the Jesuits on this corporation called the United States of America. Just to take it further and further and further away from reality. Because they don't want reality.
Gregory, it looks to me like the war in Ukraine is resolved. The Russians have recently taken out a command and control center that include officers from NATO and the UK using a Kinzhal hypersonic missile, which I say is all to the good. The Houthis are putting up a tremendous fight. They are very feisty. I'm tremendously impressed. The Israelis have begun flooding the tunnels of Hamas. They're actually defeated in ground combat with the Hamas, which are able to use rubble as, places to secure themselves, get up close. They've taken out 150 tanks and armored personnel carriers. Colonel McGregor has said the Israelis had really defeated themselves by destroying all the buildings. But get this, we now have evidence from Christopher Busby, whom I've interviewed myself, that the Israelis are using tactical nukes, neutron bombs, that they've used them in Lebanon and they've used them in Gaza, just as he discovered when he visited Fallujah that the U.S. has been using a new type of tactical nuke in Iraq. All this is outrageous. Hezbollah is starting to become very, very active on the northern frontier, and I'm suspicious, I predict, the Israelis are going to use these nukes on Hezbollah too. Can you comment on any of the above?
No. I can't. They make the news, they throw in details to the news, blah, blah, blah. So much of it isn't real, right? And it can actually be them working together. You just don't know. Like, we had this thing called the Cold War, went on from like 1961 to 1991. So it went on for 28, 30 years. And there was like 2 people killed in it. And the rest was one side killing its own side, right? And it was all about building up bureaucracy and fear. And the Khazarian mafia is just a fearmongers, and governments and the media are just fearmongers. So, well, that famous quote is, there'll always be wars and rumors of wars. And so much of it is just rumors of wars. And so much of it's just absolutely not real, but they want to keep you in a state of fear, whether you're informed or not. And when you actually meet the people and you're actually in the situations, you realize just how fake the news is. Like, I'll talk to my friends in America and they'll go, "Oh, I hear you're having a terrific storm in the UK." And there's just no storm at all, So the news that you're getting in the US and the news we're getting in the UK are completely different. None of it's true, or very little of it's true. And it's part of Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars and the Jesuits and non-directional warfare. And part of non-directional warfare is misinformation and also overloading you with information, such that you can't write a book on the war because so much of it didn't happen. Like, in the Cold War, we were taught that the Russians had 3,000 nuclear missiles.
Gregory, you got to hold that thought. We'll be right back. We will be opening the lines when we return from this break with Greg Hallett.